Car dealership manager humiliates black janitor unaware. He is the new owner in disguise. Hey, I told you not to go near that car. Back away. The voice of the dealership manager, Richard, thundered through the spacious glass-walled showroom. His tone was sharp, arrogant, and loud enough for every single employee, and even a few customers, to hear. Heads turned, conversations stopped. All eyes focused on the man he was yelling at. There, standing quietly in the corner, was an elderly black janitor. His uniform was faded, sleeves rolled up, shoes worn thin from years of hard work. He was simply doing his job, pushing a mop, bucket past the gleaming line of luxury cars parked like kings on a marble floor. His name tag read Joe. Richard marched over with heavy, impatient steps. His expensive Italian shoes echoed with each stomp. He looked Joe up and down with disgust. Watch where you're dragging that thing, Richard barked. You touch the paint on that Benz and you'll be paying it off for the next 10 years. That's if you even make that much in 10 years. The janitor didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He simply nodded gently and continued pushing the bucket, moving slowly and carefully, as if the words hadn't even landed. But they had. Oh, they had. What Richard didn't know. What no one in that showroom knew. Was that this man? The one they just mocked, overlooked, and treated like nothing more than a shadow in the corner? Wasn't just a janitor. He was a silent observer, walking the floor of the business he had just purchased 2 weeks ago. That's right. Joe was the new owner of the dealership, but he wasn't here to show off his title. He wasn't here for applause. He was here to watch, to see people's true colors when they thought no one important was watching. Joe had made his millions, quietly over the years. He grew up poor, worked small jobs, saved every penny, invested wisely, and built a fortune with patience and discipline. Now retired from the hustle, he wanted to give back. He'd recently purchased this dealership from an old friend, the previous owner, who told him, if you want to know who's loyal, show up with nothing. So Joe did just that. No Rolex, no designer suit, just a janitor's uniform, and a mission to expose every fake smile, every power-hungry manager, and every heart that had lost its kindness. Richard? He had failed that test within the first 5 minutes. The employees watching this unfold didn't know it yet. But in just 2 hours, the man they all ignored, the one mopping the same floor they walked on, was going to stand in front of them and reveal a truth that would turn the entire dealership upside down. And when that moment came, it would be too late for Richard to take his words back. Richard had always considered himself untouchable, the king of the dealership. Every morning, he arrived in his glossy black sports car, wearing suits that cost more than most of his employees' monthly salaries. His shoes were always polished, his hair always slicked back, and his smile only came out when he was shaking the hand of a wealthy customer. He believed power came from presentation. The sharper the suit, the stronger the man. He didn't see people. He saw status. So when he noticed the elderly janitor, the one with dark skin, bent shoulders, and calloused hands, slowly pushing a mop past a shiny brand new SUV, he was instantly irritated. The janitor's name tag read Joe. He moved slowly but purposefully, carefully guiding his mop around the car like a man who respected space, someone who had worked hard for every dollar in his pocket. But Richard didn't see dignity in Joe's movements. He saw a man who, in his mind, didn't belong among the polished metal and spotlights. He scoffed loudly, striding over with a smirk on his face, making sure everyone nearby could hear him. "Hey!" he barked. "Don't lean too close to that car, old man. One touch from you and you'll cost us more than your year's salary." The room went still. Joe paused, standing up a little straighter. His eyes met Richard's, calm, steady, without a hint of anger. Just wisdom. He nodded gently and whispered, "Understood, sir." But Richard wasn't finished. Not even close. His ego needed a crowd, and this moment, this was his stage. He waved over 2 junior salesmen nearby, both just a few months into the job, and said loud enough for the entire showroom to hear, "This is exactly why I say we shouldn't let lowlifes like this hang around high-end cars. They don't understand value. They've never owned anything worth more than a microwave." The young salesman chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Richard laughed for them, patting one on the back as if they had just shared a hilarious joke. Seriously, Richard continued. I mean, come on, look at him. Probably hasn't had a bank account since the 90s. The laughter grew louder, not because the joke was funny, but because the boss was laughing and no one wanted to be the odd one out, except one person. Tara. A young woman in her mid-20s, Tara had only been working at the dealership for a few months. She was smart, sharp, and driven, and she had a clear sense of right and wrong. She stood a few feet away holding a customer file, watching the scene unfold like a slow-burning fire. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't laugh, not even a smile. In fact, her face showed something few dared to display around Richard: disgust. She saw what no one else was brave enough to acknowledge, that Richard wasn't powerful. He was petty. He was a man so insecure that he needed to bully someone beneath him just to feel important. And worst of all, no one stopped him. Tara looked at Joe, still standing quietly, still holding the mop. His expression hadn't changed. He remained composed as if he had heard worse many times before. But there was something in his eyes, something unshakable. Not pain, not sadness, power. Not the kind that comes from wealth or titles. The kind that comes from experience. From knowing who you are even when others try to define you. Tara tilted her head slightly. Something wasn't adding up. Why would a janitor, someone supposedly so beneath Richard, be this calm, this unfazed? And why, just this morning, had she seen the general manager whispering something to Joe with great respect? She didn't know it yet, but she was about to witness the greatest plot twist the dealership had ever seen, because the man Richard just humiliated in front of the entire staff wasn't just anyone. He was testing them all, watching, remembering, and soon, he would no longer be the quiet janitor. He would be the one writing the paychecks, and Richard, he was digging his own grave, with every arrogant word he spoke. What nobody realized was that Joe had been watching this dealership for weeks, not as a janitor, not as a customer, not as some forgettable face passing by, but as the silent buyer, the true owner, the man who had just signed the papers to purchase the entire dealership from Mr. Thompson, a man ready to retire and spend his last days on a beach in Florida. Joe hadn't come from money. He'd built everything from the ground up, starting with a food cart on a busy street corner and grinding his way into stocks, real estate, and quiet acquisitions of struggling businesses that needed saving. He was sharp, calculated, and, above all, humble, but he also knew something most successful men forget. Money might buy ownership, but it doesn't buy respect. Not when your skin is dark, your shoes are worn, and your name doesn't scream country club. So before he walked in with his title and his authority, Joe made a bold decision, one that would reveal the soul of the place he'd just bought. He put on janitor clothes. He swept the floors, emptied trash bins, polished windows, stayed late, arrived early, never complained, never asked for more, and not a single soul knew who he truly was. At first it was amusing, the way people barely nodded at him, the way they cut him off mid-sentence, even if he was just trying to say, "Excuse me." But then, it turned ugly. He saw the truth. Richard, the dealership's general manager, the man everyone called Top Dog, strutted through the showroom like he owned it. He didn't, but that didn't stop him from acting like a king. He laughed, loudly, told vulgar jokes to impress the younger salesman, and spent more time bragging about his luxury watches than actually helping customers. "If they can't afford a car," he once said loud enough for Joe to hear, "they're just here to waste our time. Get rid of them fast." Joe saw an older man, a veteran, come in with a faded hat and hopeful eyes. He wanted something reliable for his daughter. Richard took one look at his clothes and whispered to a salesman, "Waste of time. Someone deal with Grandpa." They sent the man away with fake smiles and empty promises. Joe clenched his fists behind the mop. Another time, a young black couple came in, hopeful and excited, talking about their first family car. Richard didn't even stand to greet them. He tapped on his phone and said, "Credit check first. No point wasting time." Joe watched the couple walk out 5 minutes later, faces sunken, dreams stolen, and yet They treated him worse than all of them. Some days they'd throw trash right next to the bin instead of in it, because that's what he's here for, right? They'd joke about how some people just don't have ambition. Once Richard walked past Joe and said, to another employee, loud enough for Joe to hear, "Can you imagine being stuck like that your whole life?" I'd end it. Joe said nothing, but he remembered everything. Then finally came the day. Monday morning. Suits were on. Coffee was fresh. Richard was polishing his Rolex, talking loudly about a new boat he planned to buy. That's when a black SUV pulled up outside the glass doors. Joe stepped out. No mop. No uniform. Today he wore a custom-tailored suit, polished Italian shoes, and the calm confidence of a man who owned everything in sight. Richard barely looked up. "Customer," he muttered. "Someone go greet him." The receptionist hesitated. She recognized him. "Wait, that's..." Joe walked straight past them, right to the center of the showroom. "I'd like everyone's attention, please." Silence fell. "My name is Joe Carter, and as of last week, I am the new owner of this dealership." Mouths dropped. Coffee spilled. Richard stood frozen, lips parted, unable to speak. Joe scanned the room slowly, then landed his gaze on Richard. "I've spent the last few weeks watching, listening, learning. I came in disguise not because I enjoy mopping floors, but because I needed to know who deserved to be part of this team, who respected others, regardless of job title, race, or credit score." He took a step forward. "And Richard, you're no leader. You're a liability. You're done." Gasps echoed. Joe turned back to the staff. "This place will change. We will treat every customer with respect. We will judge no one by their clothes, color, or cash. And if that doesn't sit right with you, the door is open." And just like that, the janitor no one noticed became the boss no one could ignore. Because real power doesn't come from a suit. It comes from character. And Joe, he had more character in his calloused hands than any of them had in their polished shoes. That afternoon, a surprising announcement rippled through the dealership. "All employees, main hall, now." Whispers spread. Some joked it was about budget cuts. Others guessed a new manager. But one thing was certain. Something big was coming. The main hall was transformed. A large projection screen stood ready. Chairs were lined up in neat rows, bottled, water on each seat. It wasn't just another staff meeting, and this was something official. Richard, ever the peacock, stood at the front, adjusting his designer tie and smoothing down his hair. He gave a confident wink to Tara, the receptionist, and muttered to a junior salesman, "Must be about the new boss. Bet he's some clueless pencil pusher. Probably won't last a month." He smirked, patting his chest proudly. "Don't worry. Whoever it is, I'll still be running things." Then the doors at the back creaked open. Every head turned, and in walked Joe. But not the Joe they thought they knew. No janitor uniform, no mop, no gloves. He wore a crisp black tailored suit, a silver watch gleaming at his wrist, and the unmistakable presence of someone in control. Silence hit the room like a wave. Richard blinked, then laughed, loudly and awkwardly. "Hey, Joe! Looks like you got lost on your way to the maintenance room." Some nervous chuckles followed, but no one else joined in. A few employees exchanged glances, unease setting in. That's when Mr. Thompson stepped up to the microphone. The former owner, who'd run the place for decades, looked calm and content, holding a paper in his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice firm but warm, "today marks a new chapter in this dealership's history." He gestured toward Joe. "I'd like you all to meet the new owner of this business, Mr. Joseph Miller." The air snapped. Mouths dropped. Richard's smile shattered. His tan face went pale. Joe stepped forward slowly, standing beside the man who had mocked him just hours earlier. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm presence demanded silence. "Funny," Joe began, his eyes scanning the room. "This morning I was told I didn't belong here." His words hung heavy in the air. He turned slowly to Richard, who was now sweating through his expensive blazer, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "But let me tell you who doesn't belong here." He paused. Not for effect, but for truth. Someone who judges people by their job title, their clothes, or their skin. Joe turned slightly, raising a hand toward the projector screen behind him. With a click, the room darkened. The footage began, grainy but clear. Hidden camera clips rolled across the screen. Richard, laughing crudely with other managers, calling customers broke time wasters, clips of him belittling employees, ignoring minorities, and even telling a young intern, "You'll be cleaning toilets your whole life if you don't get your act together." And then, the final clip, Richard mocking Joe directly, right outside the janitor closet. "If I end up like that guy," Richard had said, "just shoot me." Gasps filled the room. Tara covered her mouth. A junior salesman looked away in shame. The lights came back on. Richard looked around in panic, his voice cracking. That was taken out of context. I didn't know." Joe turned to face the staff once more, voice clear. "I spent weeks here, watching, listening, learning who you really are when no one's watching." He stepped forward. "And let me say this clearly. Kindness costs nothing. But arrogance," he turned back to Richard, "that'll cost you your job." The room went dead silent. "You're fired." Richard stood frozen for a second, then tried to speak, but Joe raised a hand. "I won't hear excuses. You didn't just fail at sales, you failed at basic human decency, and this dealership will not be built on that." Security, already briefed, stepped forward quietly. Richard backed away, muttering, grabbing his jacket. As the doors closed behind him, Joe faced the team once more. "This isn't just about cars. This is about how we treat people. From now on, every single person who walks through those doors, customer or employee, gets treated with dignity." He let that sink in, because real success isn't just in profits. It's in the respect we earn. The room erupted, not in applause, but in something more powerful, renewed belief. And just like that, the man they ignored became the leader they would never forget. Richard stormed out, red-faced, humiliated, and defeated. His expensive shoes echoed loudly against the showroom tiles, the same floor he once strutted across like he owned the place. Now, he couldn't even meet anyone's eyes, the heavy glass doors shut behind him. But Joe wasn't done. He turned back to the stunned employees, some standing, some sitting frozen in place, some wide-eyed as if they'd just woken up from a dream. Joe walked back to the center, adjusted his cufflink, and took a breath. "This dealership is about to change," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "We will treat every customer, every employee, and yes, every janitor, with respect. Not because it's policy, but because it's right." He let his eyes sweep across the room. The mechanics in their overalls, the junior sales reps in mismatched suits, the receptionist clutching her notepad, all still processing what they'd just witnessed. "Everyone matters," Joe continued, "from the one who washes the floor to the one who signs the checks." There was a pause. Then it started. Applause. It began as a slow, unsure clap from the back row, then a second, then a third, until the entire room was on their feet, clapping, not just out of duty, but out of respect. Real, earned, heartfelt respect. Tara, the receptionist who had always treated Joe kindly, even when she thought he was just the janitor, stepped forward. Her eyes were glassy, but she smiled. "Sir, I just want to say thank you," she said quietly, voice catching in her throat. "Not just for exposing him, but for showing us what real leadership looks like." Joe looked at her, moved, and gave a small, appreciative nod. "Leadership," he replied, "isn't about the title on your nameplate. It's about the weight of your actions." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The kind of silence that comes when people are rethinking everything they thought they knew. Then Joe smiled. Not the smile of a man who'd won a victory, but of someone who had waited a long time for the truth to speak louder than image. "Starting tomorrow," he continued, We'll run things differently. We'll have new training, not just on how to sell a car, but how to treat a human being. We'll have anonymous customer feedback, and yes, there will be opportunities for growth, but not based on charm, based on character. Heads nodded. Eyes glistened. A few of the younger team members looked visibly inspired, as if something inside them had shifted. Joe took one last glance at the screen behind him, now blank. Then he stepped down from the stage. That evening, the dealership buzzed with a different kind of energy. People stayed late, not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of something new, something better. And from that day on, the dealership transformed, not just in numbers, though those came too. Sales soared within months. Customer reviews glowed. People said things like, "It just feels different here," or "I was treated like family, not just a wallet." But the real success wasn't in profit margins or awards. It was in the way employees greeted each other, the way the cleaning staff was offered lunch at the same table, the way Joe, despite owning the whole place, still showed up early, sometimes grabbing a broom without saying a word. Because he hadn't forgotten where he came from, and he never wanted them to forget either. Every Friday, Joe held a 10-minute team meeting, not to talk about sales quotas, but to share a story, sometimes his, sometimes someone else's, about the value of humility, courage, and respect. And slowly, that culture changed lives. Tara got promoted. The young intern who was once dismissed by Richard became one of the top salesmen. Mechanics began suggesting improvements and were actually listened to. No one was invisible anymore. And while Joe never demanded recognition, the city noticed. The dealership was named Best Workplace of the Year. Local newspapers ran features titled, "From Janitor to Owner, the Man Who Changed Everything." But if you asked Joe about it, he'd just chuckle and say, "I didn't change everything. I just reminded people of what should have never been, forgotten." Because the man they once ignored, the man they called just the janitor, turned out to be the true definition of success. Not because of what he owned, but because of who he chose to be. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button. And for more powerful stories and motivation, subscribe now, because your success starts right here with us.